6 months, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's been a wild ride just the last week in Bitcoin. We've seen Bitcoin really surge to the upside. One of the big questions that a lot of people have asked me is, why has Bitcoin diverged from the stock market? We've seen the stock market be generally weaker. We've seen some downside, down 5, 6, 7% in the NASDAQ. And yet Bitcoin has actually gained quite a bit of strength. And the theory I have is this, is that you're starting to see stocks like AMC, GameStop, and these meme stocks really start to stall out and head lower. And my theory is that you're seeing a lot of money from average investors that were kind of riding these names. They're starting to pull it and go into the hot area, which happens to be Bitcoin. And that's propelling Bitcoin higher. So as you get more kind of negativity on the stock market, it's actually starting to benefit cryptocurrency in the near term.
What about liquidity coming out of the Chinese markets, Asian markets, and China stocks?
Yeah, I think that's probably a portion of it as well. You're seeing how the stock market in the US was the recipient of that for the last multiple months, as the Hang Seng and the Shanghai have been coming in and the regulation has been there. The Evergrande situation has kind of been developing. But now that the stock market again is weaker, that money is starting to look for other areas. And it's really the hot hand, right? I mean, we're so used to this in this market environment over the last couple of years, where GameStop was the hot stock for days, and then it was AMC, then it was Palantir has been a hot one, and it's kind of chased the hot name. And right now, Bitcoin is the hot name. However, I will say this, is that Bitcoin just hit a very important level to me. And if I can get screen sharing, I'd love to show this to you guys out there. So let's take a look here at the Bitcoin chart. And let me bring up my screen. And what you can see here is that this is that former trend line that I've come on with you, Greg, and I've talked on in other places about that scene of the crime neckline of the head and shoulder pattern. So you can see clearly, here's your pivot. Here's your little area right here. Here was your shoulder, head and shoulder before the 30,000 collapse. And notice how that line extends right out. Here you kissed it and had the big fall. And look at what you're doing today on Bitcoin. You're up into it. You just pierced it. Now you're starting to pull back a little bit. This is kind of what I'm zoning in on in terms of near-term resistance. So I'm not going to make any judgments for the next 24 hours. I want to see, once the dust settles, is this line, does price close above it? Do we continue up, or do we see a pullback off of this level? The one thing I will say is that the bullish sentiment is at a feverish pitch right now. You'd almost get the sense that we're at the 65,000 level. We were, months ago when we hit that 65,000, with how bullish the sentiment is. And that does concern me. It does make me again just say, listen, ignore emotion. What are the charts saying? And the charts are saying clearly, this is resistance. Now the chart needs to prove that it can get above. If it gets above, you have really a good amount of resistance, not until almost 60,000. Then a little bit of a level here at 62, and then really the 65,000 level would be your next spot. So again, this is the one you're watching. Watch that 54 to 55,000 range. Let's see where it is in the next couple of days.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, do you use fib retracements at all?
I do. I absolutely do. I look at them as part of kind of the repertoire of various technical signals, but fibs are very, very important. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that is also, isn't that the 702?
Yep. Yeah, you're right on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a big one there, getting through the 702, and then the next level, from there, to the 786, until Bitcoin or anything really gets through those levels, you're not really in the clear. But it's interesting that it's rejecting to that, what you call scene of the crime, and the 702 all at the same, that's the same level.
And in technical trading, you'll find that is, if you learn enough about technicals, the best resistance and support lines are going to be where things match up. So you have one technical signal hitting at 10, $20, and then you'll find something else right around that same instance. And that's where you're going to have the most resistance.
Right. So, yeah, and you're right there. The sentiment out there, I mean, it's almost now the narrative is a given that we're going to hit 100,000. It's just a matter of when, not if. And it's almost assumed the next stop is 100 grand, almost nonstop, with no pullbacks, no retracements, anything like that. So it's really interesting. So let's say that we are going to hit 100 grand by the end of the year. What does that path look like given your theory?
So for me, I still am hard pressed to believe that we would hit 100,000. And let me just be clear, because a lot of people are always asking. They always say, "Well, you've been saying 18 to 20,000 within 6 months or so that we'll get down there. Has anything changed?" And the answer is, until the chart tells me it changes, nothing has changed. And if you look at the previous cycles from 2013 and 2017, you had lots of chop like this after the all-time high in 2013 was put in at $1,250 approximately, and approximately 20,000 in 2017. There was that big move down, then a big move up, and lots of chop before you ultimately rolled over. So as far as I'm concerned, the 65,000 to me is the level, right? So that's the one thing that would differentiate this current price action from the past cycles and would tell me, okay, if you're able to do that, then this has no relation to past cycles, which have been 4-year and change cycles, and you could easily get to that 100,000 level. So again, that's what I'm going to follow. Again, as a trader or an investor, if you're going to be successful in this game, you can't let emotion get out of control. I mean, you can't chase moves, you can't get fearful and freak out and sell. You have to say, okay, what's the chart saying here? And that'll give you the credence to do what you need to do. And right here, it's just telling that, okay, it's a great move up, but so far the thesis of a cycle top from 65K hasn't changed.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we're still kind of stuck. We punched through 55 a little bit, but it's kind of, holding that line right there. Yeah. And like you said, we got to get closed above it. Let's take a look at the 2017. I don't really look at 2013 a whole lot because I don't think there was as much institutional involvement back then, and not a lot of large whales with the liquidity that they have now, just because simply the price wasn't where it is now, giving, large holders a lot more, liquidity to work with. So I know you've talked about this 2017. Where do you feel like on this chart, where we are today?
So that's a great question. And I think if you're comparing the price action, so we just took out that previous 53,000 high. So if you're looking at this, right, here's your 20,000 high. This would be your 65,000 that we hit months ago. You then had your drop to 30,000. This would be your 30,000 down here. You then had your pop to 60 to 53,000. That's probably what this is right in here. Then you had your dip off of that. And then if this is that same move up, this 17,000 high would be the equivalent of wherever this move is going, which should be shy of that 65,000. So again, we're trying to fit it into a perfect puzzle. Oftentimes charts are not perfect like that, but that would actually make sense why we're taking out that recent high here, which again, if we go back to Bitcoin, right? So this is that recent high that we made. Then we had the sell off, and here we're making a higher high, but still not above that $65,000 level. So that would be my assumption if it is going to match the past cycles.
Yeah, interesting. And it looks to me like it could be, even maybe where that $5,000 bottom was and bounce up to that double top right there before the final capitulation.
It's very possible. Yeah. I mean, it's as a trader and a technical, guru, it's one of those things where you're always trying to figure this stuff out. It's like you have pieces, you have 1,000-piece puzzle and you're trying to fit the different things in. And when they fit perfectly, you're like, oh, okay. And then you have to fit another piece in, and you kind of have to continue to do that. And there's always the chance that you're going to be wrong, right? And that's just the probabilities of investing and trading. But the idea is you just want to get those odds in your favor. And then once, let's say, a 65,000 gets taken out, then you have to say, okay, well, now there's no chance of this fitting in any prior mold. And you have to go on the side that it could go higher at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And, from a longevity standpoint, future of Bitcoin, obviously Bitcoin's not going anywhere. It's just going to continue to gain more adoption. So 100K is more likely in the future than not. The question is it this year? Is it next year? When is it? And irregardless, I guess, unless we get over that 55K and start moving up above 65, we won't know for sure. But once you clear 65, you're saying, well, then we probably definitely are on that path to maybe that 100K level and beyond.
Yeah, and if we clear 65, by no means would it, like, let's say we went straight to 65 here. For me, I would never be a buyer at that point, right? A lot of people are like, well, it appears 65, so Gareth says it's going straight to 100,000. As a trader, you would never chase something that goes from 40,000 to 65. What you would do is you'd look for a bull flag, you'd look for some sort of pullback, and then buy that pullback.